So on behalf of Christian Aid, Zimbabwe Council of Churches, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, and Budget Advocacy Network, I want to say akwaba to this session in my Ghanaian voice. For far too long, discussions at and beyond the FFD4 has informed us of a truth that we can no longer deny, that the call for reparation and reforms in the structural system is gaining new momentum. Yesterday in the room, it was so clear, it was so evident that these discussions are really taking the position or the heights we have anticipated it to take. And this is so because the economic orders rest on the colonial extraction of slavery and of underdevelopment. So now, this is not just a discussion on economic issues. It is a matter of repair, it is a matter of justice, and it is a matter of our dignity as human. So this session is about making the connections between the local community resisting unjust debt and tax systems, and that of the global structures that are advocating for or demanding for a reform. That is what we are here to do. Connections between the faith-based group, the feminist movement, the climate activists, and that of the economic advocates. Often at times, these structures are dealt with separately. But in reality, they are interconnected. We cannot talk about debt justice without looking at it as a feminist issue. And as well, we cannot talk about tax justice without looking at climate issues. And of course, reparations are that of moral and faith imperative. So here at AfCoDD 5, and through our work as Christian Aid and our partners and beyond, we seek to make sure that these conversations are advanced in an intersectional way, building bridges between movements, amplifying voice from the margins, and co-creating strategies for a financial system that is fair, accountable, and rooted in repair. So today, I invite us all not just to reflect on the colonial and structural roles of Africa's debt crisis, but to also imagine what a transformative, gender-just, and reparative financial architecture could look like. We will be drawing lessons from countries such as Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe, and beyond. And we'll also draw strength from the feminist struggles for equality, strength from faith traditions that demand justice, and the urgency from the climate movement that keeps reminding us that time is running out. This is a collective journey, one that calls for courage, resilience, and solidarity across borders and movements. And I look forward to having a rich discussion around this topic that will help us to shape together the advocacy strategies that will carry forward this global movement for reparations and justice. As we begin, let us make this commitment together to push back against systems that exploit and to build a financial order that restores dignity, justice, and hope to our continent. Across faiths, movements, nations, we have the power to turn reparations from a demand into a reality. And of course, the time is now. And it starts with all of us in the room and even those out of this room. So for this discussion today, I have 4 panelists, and I know they are going to do justice to the topic of discussion, and we'll try our best to manage time. And for that, we have a colleague in the audience, Africa, who will be raising a hand to indicate to a speaker to show that it remains 2 minutes in their talking time. We want to show justice, but as well keep track of time. So I have Jennifer on my extreme end, Jennifer Labi. She is the head of the Advocacy campaign for Christian Aid. Jennifer is responsible for Christian Aid's campaign on climate and economic justice, and for involving supporters, the church, and the public to make change happen. Jennifer joined Christian Aid in October 2020, and she's almost clocking 5 years now. And previously, she was the head of Foreign Defense and International Development Policy at the Labour Party in the UK, where she also directed international democracy building programs. Jennifer holds a master's degree in development studies from the London School of Economics, specializing in economic development policy in Africa. She has previously had roles in Parliament and the National Education Union. So you see, we have a rich and resourceful person in the room. Jennifer, you're welcome. And we also have Abubakar, that is closer to her. He is the coordinator for Budget Advocacy Network BAN in Sierra Leone. Abubakar has been working around budget and its related issues for the past 8 years, and he is responsible to ensure that both national and local government budgets are transparent, accountable, and participatory in a bid to ensure that the budgets are pro-poor. Mr. Kamara has vast experience in using budget data for advocacy purpose to influence change in favor of the poor and the marginalized. And next to him is Admaya Mitiwa. Sorry if I'm not able to pronounce the name well. Church Peace and Just Society, Zimbabwe Council of Churches. Admaya has over 15 years of experience in accounting, provision of research services, policy and strategy advisory, data analysis, economic analysis. He has advanced work on trade justice, financing for development, and regional integration in Africa. Admire, you're welcome. And last but not the least is John Makito, the National Director for Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. John has a work experience in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa for the past 19 years. And 11 of those years are in civic leadership and strategic management. His interest in development, financing, development policy and practice, public finance management systems, and structural inequalities, livelihoods and value chain strengthening, transformational leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, these are honorable panelists for this discussion. And mark you, our discussion is on faith, feminism, fiscal justice, reclaiming power to reform the global financial architecture. Akwaba again in my Ghanaian language. And I'll want to start with Admire. I don't want to do it in an organized way. I'll be doing it either way I deem fit. So, Admire, faith communities have long been at the heart or have been playing a pivotal role in the justice struggles in Zimbabwe. And the voices shaping national conversation on equity and accountability. So now, what is Zimbabwe's Council of Churches' vision for reparative justice for Zimbabweans? And what effort has been done so far, and how do you envisage the faith-based organization collaborating with feminist movement and civic actors to push forward these visions?
Thank you very much, Victoria. As introduced, my name is Admaya Mtizwa. I work with the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, and I'm a program director responsible for the work of the church in building peace and also in fostering social justice. I want to thank our partners here, Christian Aid, AfCoDD, and our colleagues from Sierra Leone as we are hosting this session. So to begin with, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches was established in 1964. And I'm saying this so that you have an appreciation of its role, both when it fought the war of liberation. When I meet and when we discuss with the church leaders in Zimbabwe, they always remind us that if we talk about war veterans in my country, we should always remember that the church is one of the war veterans because they played a critical role in supporting the war of liberation in Zimbabwe. When the Zimbabwe Council of Churches was established in 1964, one of the key discussions which was happening then was about the role of the church in fighting colonialism, which side to take, because then there was still the dominance of the missionary in Zimbabwe. So the church leaders, some of the church leaders took a very strong role in supporting the war of liberation to fight against colonialism. And this history is critical as we reflect today because we are still in this fight of colonialism and neo-colonialism. And it reminds me that in January this year, our Theology and Church Unit Committee of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches met to deliberate on reflecting on the role of the church in contemporary struggles in Zimbabwe today. And one of the decisions and the resolutions that they made was to make it clear that the church has a clear role to play when it comes to the public space. And they wanted to refute the narrative that the church should remain behind the pulpit. But they also wanted to make it clear that the role of the church, when you use the pulpit, is to promote holistic mission. And when we talk about holistic mission, we are talking about our spiritual well-being and our physical well-being. And the issues that we deliberate with, the struggles that we are talking about here, they touch on both our physical and our spiritual well-being. So the church should not be sidelined when we are having this conversation. Now, specific to reparative justice. So my first point is that the church has always in Zimbabwe played a critical role towards social justice, starting with the liberation, fighting against colonialism in Zimbabwe. And now we are at this juncture where we are talking about reparations. What is the vision of the churches in Zimbabwe, particularly from the side of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches? We are envisioning a Zimbabwe which is just, which is peaceful, which is prosperous, and which is united. And this cannot happen if there is no restoration of the hurts that happened in the past. And if there is no the correction of the injustices that continues to happen today, and also if there is no prevention of possibilities of future forms of colonialism. So we stand at a point where we are looking at the history, what happened in the past. It requires to be repaired, it requires to be corrected. But we are also looking at what is currently happening now, the neo forms of colonialism, these debt issues that we are talking about, tax injustices, the injustices relating to trade, international development cooperation, digitalization, technology, climate change. So the church is continuously reflecting on these neo forms of colonialism, and the church is seeking and promoting justice. But I'm also saying that we are looking into the future. We are envisioning an alternative future where there is justice, where the global financial and economic architecture, it promotes the dignity of human being. It ensures that all the current forms of inequalities, structural and systemic inequalities, they do not continue to persist. So we are also a forward-looking faith group, or we are a forward-looking church that we are saying it has to play a central role in the reform of the global financial architecture. So with this in mind, we are very aware of that the fact that the subject of reparations is quite complex. We have held a national conference of reparations in Zimbabwe, a multi-stakeholder conference, and we have also initiated a research process of trying to understand the thinking of Zimbabweans to say what could be the priority issues when it comes to reparations. And quite a number of issues came up in the exploratory paper. One is the issue of colonialism. The injustices that came with colonialism are a priority, a matter that need to be addressed within the reparations framework. But also the economic exploitation, the exploitation that happened during the time of colonialism, but also that continues to happen today, are again an issue of priority. But we also have the issues to do with land dispossession. The land question in Zimbabwe is not yet complete. It's still an issue that is at hand. Many Zimbabweans in the room, they might be aware that government is actually in the process of undertaking a process of giving title deeds to Zimbabwean farmers. But it has also compensated the former white farmers whose land was taken during the process of fast-track land reform. But already with that process, some have raised concerns relating to the priority given to compensating the white farmers. At the same time, these are the same people who dispossessed the black owners when the land was taken away from indigenous farmers. But we also have issues to do with neoliberalism and the effects of the economic structural adjustment program policies. They caused significant harm to the Zimbabwean economy, and people still think when we talk about reparations, the framework should be able to address the effects of such policies as neoliberalism. And the issue of climate change, it also comes in. Zimbabwe is now facing the consequences of the climate crisis. We are seeing increased high temperatures or extreme temperatures. We are seeing increasing floods, but also issues of cyclones, as well as the general decline in terms of availability of rainfalls. So agriculture is now significantly affected because of the changes in climate change, and the economy, which is supposed to be anchored on climate, on agriculture, is no longer really benefiting from the agriculture sector. So these are some of the priorities that were coming out in the exploratory paper. So as I conclude, we are looking at reparative justice, which seeks to address and to redress these historical injustices and future-proof the global financial and economic system against these injustices to happen again in the future. As faith, we look at this reparative justice agenda to be rooted in theology and also the African philosophy of Ubuntu. The framework must emphasize the importance of human dignity, community building, mutual cooperation, restoration, and healing of our communities. I will end here. Thank you.
Maya, thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear the background, how it all started for the churches in Zimbabwe, how far they've come, and I'm sure there are lessons to be learned from them for the other African countries, the churches in the other African countries, to know that the discussions happening around reparations and reparative justice is not just an economic thing, but also an issue of human dignity. And so I want to go to Abubakar, Budget Advocacy Network. In Sierra Leone, we've seen how BAN has been at the forefront in pushing for better use of public funds, public resources, how they are managed, and how you've managed to see that the spaces are open for the public to understand what is happening and how it has been going on. So what lessons can be drawn from Budget Advocacy Network's experience in fighting for good public economic governance in Sierra Leone to global economic governance? What lessons can we draw from BAN?
There are many lessons. Can you give me 2 hours to explain?
I am afraid we have to do justice to time, and so I'll just give you 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. You know, yesterday in the opening, I totally agree to Dr. Patrick's point, which he really emphasized over and over in terms of, for us to engage on this issue, we have to be strong. And to be strong, one of the meanings of to be strong is you have to be able to generate your own resources to feed your people, provide health care, provide hospitals. And if African countries are able to minimize their domestic revenue leakages, you know, what the Muslims say, well, lie, they'll be able to cater the basic needs for the people. I can give you an example. When we started the tax exemption work in 2012, we did a report in 2013. We just looked at 4 multinationals. By then, the revenue forgone for those 4 multinationals, which does not include all of the incentives being granted, is $224 million a year. And that resources was 7 times the health budget, plus 8 times the education budget by then. And of course, we know the major beneficiary of the health budget are women and children. So we started a whole lot of work around, first of all, we do not have a policy, a whole lot of advocacy around getting the policy, getting the law, and of course, later we saw overall the tax expenditure reduced to 50 million. And of course, that led to now the government started publishing more tax exemption in their budget and all part of this one. But what is critical here is the issue of transparency in granting tax incentives. And one lesson that can be learned from Sierra Leone is the fact that if we have a law and citizens are following up on the law on a consistent manner, we started the work to get governments develop a policy and a law in 2013, and we were all able to get a law in 2023. That's 10 years. So this work around reparation we are doing, we have to be consistent and ensure that the legal framework are really strong to address these issues. But most often, and what we have learned in Sierra Leone, because we are not consistent or we are not following up, things slip up the way. Just because we have some 2-3 years lags in terms of monitoring and follow-up on these tax incentive issues, we saw in 2023, after 2023, the revenue forgone for just the industry sector is $150 million per year. And of course, that resources means thousands of women and children will go without proper health care. So, but if you look at those that are granted the incentives, the majority of them are from the countries we are requesting reparation from. So it's like eating twice. So whilst we're asking for reparation, more of these resources are taken in a different form from our countries. We are granting gracious and unending tax incentives. We look at some of the companies that are granting incentives. Some of them, over 10, 15 years, open-ended incentives. So addressing the revenue leakages is key. But overall, tax incentives, they are not issues that can be addressed nationally. It requires global effort. It requires regional effort because they normally create unharmful competition. So therefore, the need for Africa, ECOWAS, AU, AfCoDD to really work on the implementation of a harmonized tax incentives issues. It's just one example. Now let me give another example before Victoria says my time is up. In terms of what is happening nationally and how that can be looked at globally. The whole issue around public debt, one of the problems we are facing is transparency. How do we ensure that our public debt at the national level are transparent? And this also reflects globally. And of course, we all know what that will lead to, the issue of unhidden debt. We saw here yesterday the example that was given from, I think it's Zimbabwe, the 2016 tuna bond scandal. Of course, that destabilized the whole entire region and right to the whole global market. So, from bank perspective at national level, we have pushed for a legal framework that will ensure that public debt information are accessible. So we use the legal framework to ensure that tax information are published in the national budget, and there is a law that guarantees that particular aspect. But it's not just a national issue in terms of ensuring that so there is a need globally to continue to push for the transparency of public debt. Because the effects are enormous when our local governments are not making the citizens know how much they have borrowed in a comprehensive manner and for what purpose and how they are utilizing this one. So the need for us to work together to push for the issue on debt transparency globally and then nationally. So in conclusion, some of the lessons we have learned, and of course, which we all know can be used globally, is that we need to be able to generate credible evidence that are authentic. Let me just give you one example quickly, Victoria. When we did our 2013 tax incentive work, it took us like 9 months just for the government, for the Revenue Authority to confirm that indeed our figures are correct. And in a week, we launched the report, and it was covered by BBC media, by BBC. And when they asked the Minister of Information by then, the first statement is that these figures are wrong. So we just forward him quickly the confirmation from NRA. Quickly he changed his tone now and said, it's a business. If I lose $224 million annually and I'm getting $300 million, I have a profit. So we should be able to generate credible evidence and be consistent in our advocacy. The work we are doing here around reparation is going to be a long journey. But when we are consistent and able to generate the evidence and ensure that our legal systems are strong, our regulatory system are strong, and we bring the citizens on board on all of these ones. So for us, all of the work we do, we try to give it a human face. How does it affect women and children? How does it affect our education system? So with all of this, lastly, especially on issues that cross across continents, we have to work together as a coalition, build a stronger voice. If we are not together as African to address African problem, and of course, even when we are together, they will always try to separate us. So therefore, let's work together in unity and be consistent in what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bakar. And I think I support greatly in that, that it's a call for solidarity, it's a call for resilience, it's a call for courage for all of us as Africans to be where it matters and to take the conversations where they're supposed to be. And I want to go over to John, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt. ZimCoD, for short, the work you guys have been doing have in some way remind us of the struggles around debt and fiscal justice. So it's not only a national challenge, but also part of a wider global call for fairness and accountability in the economic system. So with that, I want you to tell us how Zimbabwe's struggles with debt and fiscal justice shaped your vision as ZimCoD for an alternative global economic governance.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Well, maybe a bit outline on the struggles of Zimbabwe with its public debt. One or two issues to outline that make our case unique, probably. We are one of the countries that has spent more than 2 decades locked out of concessional loans. Literally, we are not able to access concessional financing from international financial institutions for the last 2 decades, over 2 decades. This was triggered by default in repayments of debt from early 2000 after sanctions were imposed on the country. Following a violent and a controversial land reform program that led to the West reacting by imposing sanctions on us. And the alternative during that period has been resorting to expensive external financing from private lenders, bilateral lenders that are very extractive and exploitative in nature, high interest rates, punctuating those loans, arrears, penalties, and resource mortgaging. This has been the feature and characteristic of the non-concessional loans that Zimbabwe has been accessing over the last 2 decades. So it's been part of our struggle. Part of our struggle was also to deal with a big package of an odious debt. The first part of that package is inherited, colonial public debt, then the post-independence odious and illegitimate debt contracted by the administration in Harare for reasons that are not very constitutional, that are not of national interest, and also the benefits of such have not served and were not serving the citizens of Zimbabwe. So in that regard, we consider that component of our public debt to be quite odious. Most of it has benefited politically exposed persons that are connected to the political elite. And I want to highlight that as well, that in our case, it's not just external debt, which is problematic, but we even have a bigger problem with our domestic debt, where the instrument of debt assumption has been used to transfer a financial burden to the citizens from few individuals that borrow from banks, and then the debts are cancelled for them and transferred to the national fiscus. So that's been part of our struggle of the debt. The struggle has also included, yes, isolation from the international community, making it difficult to trade, making it difficult to access loans, like I've already highlighted. And we have not been spared or been immune to the challenges brought about by global financial architecture, the shifting geopolitics. These have all affected us. And of course, the Look East policy, we presented ourselves so vulnerable to the Eastern Bloc, which did not waste the opportunity. And as it stands, I think China is our biggest new lender, both in financial terms and non-financial terms. Now, the lessons that we have learned along the way as we struggled with the debt situation in Zimbabwe is that, firstly, public debt is not just an economic issue. It's a very political one. It's a very political one, and it has been used as a political instrument, both internally and externally. It has influenced our external relations, and it has also been used politically, internally, to mobilize and consolidate political power. Like I said, at one point, we have an episode where our central bank dished out loan packages in US dollar denominations in terms of farm implements to individuals of influence within the system. And a few years down the line, those debts were literally cancelled and all that absorbed by the national fiscus. So it's a sad story of our history in terms of debt justice in Zimbabwe. What then? How that shaped our vision for debt justice in Zimbabwe and in the region is the lesson that it's important for civic actors to bring public debt management to prominence in issues of governance, and not isolate this as a mere macroeconomic issue. Like I highlighted, debt is a very political phenomenon. It's a governance issue. The other lesson that shaped our vision as well is that there is a very strong interconnectedness between public debt and corruption. In fact, debt can be used to finance corrupt activities without the public being aware of that. And just maybe to make a slight correction about my brother making reference to the tuna bonds. Things have happened in our story, but the tuna bonds were not part of that. That's a Mozambique scenario. They are our neighbors, but we did not have the tuna bonds scandal in Zimbabwe. But we had our own, scandals that are different. I cannot mention them all because of our time here. But I wanted to make reference to the interconnectedness of corruption and debt, which has manifested itself in different ways and formatted different scenarios, including influencing elections and election results. That has also happened. And the other key and important lesson that has shaped our vision is that it's important for citizens to reclaim public finances for the people. And at AfCoDD, we believe that public finance is not just about numbers, like highlighted. It is about power, it is about dignity, it is about justice. Our lived experiences of debt distress, fiscal repression, and extractive global rules has taught us that poverty is political and inequality is actually engineered, it's man-made. I subscribe to assertions made yesterday that poverty undermines sovereignty, but I'll add that poverty also undermines people's dignity, both at household level and at a national level. So the last maybe submission is also to say that we have resolved to put a human face to the debt crisis in Zimbabwe, to say we cannot talk about public debt without putting a human face to it. Doing so makes it an abstract issue, but when we talk about public debt, we want to show the opportunity costs of debt servicing. We want to show what it means in terms of service delivery, costs in terms of missed out opportunities, in terms of education, access to health, and better standards of living in a civilized world. I want to stop there before you take the mic from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. A lot to learn from there, from the Zimbabwe perspective. As Africa, government and civil society are increasingly articulating the vision for fairer and more effective global financial architecture rooted in reparative justice. We've had all this while since yesterday we were in the room, a lot of talks around reparation and reparative justice. And I want to pose this question to Jennifer. How is the Global North engaging in these proposals? And where do you see hope for global solidarity? And where do you see continued challenges in making African voices heard with the UK government, for instance?
Thank you, Victoria. It's an immense privilege to be on the panel with my Christian Aid team and esteemed Christian Aid partners at this conference. And it's even more of a privilege to be an African voice as an African Ghanaian heritage, an African voice in the UK advocating for debt justice and reparations. Christian Aid is an official development agency of 41 British and Irish sponsoring churches, including the Church of England. And I say that, and it'll become clear why I'm saying that. But hold that fact in your mind. And to Victoria's question, I think it's helpful for me to shed light and insight on how advocacy and campaigning on debt justice and reparations is going in the UK as the kind of hub of the global North. And I think it's an important perspective because, as we know, Britain, for example, was a key architect of colonization and slavery, which were at the heart of the British Empire and central to the British Industrial Revolution and Britain's development strategy. But of course, Western history would have us believe that Britain's development and its industrialization trajectory was neutral, when in fact we know it was delivered off the back of African slaves and colonial occupation. So when it comes to connecting the dots, we must remember that any progress on our demands to reform the global financial architecture, to deliver debt cancellation, to reverse the resource flows back to Africa, will also be won alongside working with, campaigning with civil society groups, churches, citizens, and the African diaspora in the global north. And I will talk specifically about the UK and London. So that means engaging with British civil society, with churches, to make the case and to demand that the UK government, the British establishment, does owe reparations, financial, cultural, political, spiritual, economic, historical, to Africa. It does owe those reparations. And reminding the British government and the British establishment that the very wealth enjoyed by British people and Britain was built on the resources and extraction and exploitation of Africa and African people. So in terms of our campaign, what we're doing and how it's going, this is why Christian Aid and its partners in the UK have prioritised campaigning and demanding debt legislation in particular. So that is debt laws that can be enacted by the British government. And we're prioritising this because, as Dr. Lillian said yesterday, and she said this with crystal clear clarity, it's not an accident that 90% of debt contracts to the global south are governed by English law. So that's 90%. So another fact to hold in your head. So in other words, private creditors can demand immediate debt repayment using courts in London. So that means London, the City of London, courts in London are complicit in the neo-colonial tool of debt injustice. So our campaign is calling for the UK to introduce laws to compel those same creditors to engage and deliver debt relief and debt cancellation, because many of them are refusing to engage in debt cancellation, and there's absolutely nothing political legislation to stop them from doing so. And we also heard yesterday from Donald Dyer the power of law and legislation as a tool to reclaim reparations. So this is why campaigning on debt legislation has been a central plank of work for me and my team. And we've been doing this under what we call the Restore campaign. So that's Christian Aid using its prophetic voice to demand reparative economic justice. And we focus on this, we focus on legislation, we focus on debt justice because of the history of the Jubilee debt campaign, which has been talked about in this conference already. And I think it's important to note that whilst it succeeded in cancelling billions of debt 25 years ago, it actually failed to dismantle the very global financial architecture that keeps the African continent and other global south countries in perpetual debt crisis. So cancelling debt doesn't stop there. We need to call for the system to be dismantled. We need to call for the system to be completely rebuilt, because as we know and as we've heard, the system is rigged against Africa. And I think the call for a global, a UN debt mechanism is a first step to achieving that. So how is this all going? So I've set the context. Now let me give a little bit of hope on how it's going. Many British churches, so including the Church of England, which is still effectively the church of the British state, has acknowledged the role of Britain and the church in slavery and colonization. Many churches have apologized, some have offered financial reparations of sorts, but this didn't happen by accident. It happened as a result of decades of campaigning and advocacy by reparations movements in the UK and civil society movements in the UK. And this is really important because the recognition that the wealth of the church and the wealth of the British state comes from the crimes of slavery and colonization has really helped to take the taboo out of reparations in the public discourse in the UK. 10 years ago, talking about reparations, talking about climate reparations, debt reparations, was just a no-go area in the UK. So the fact that the Church of England and other British church established organisations have recognised that reparations is not a myth, that reparations is a legitimate demand, has helped with the public campaigning and advocacy in the UK. So that is some hope. I think something else to encourage us is that the development sector, so the big NGOs, many represented here today, Christian Aid, Oxfam, Action Aid, I can see their logos behind us, are unifying around climate reparations, debt reparations, and are unifying around demanding that the UK recognises its historical role in underdeveloping the continent of Africa. But friends, we do have a long way to go, so that's the end of my hope chapter. In terms of the challenges that we face, again, to complete my answer to Victoria's question, we do have a long way to go. A lot of what has been achieved in this space is now at risk because of the backdrop of the rise in authoritarianism in the global north, the rise of anti-immigration rhetoric, the rise of the far right in the UK, crowding out the progress that we've made on campaigning on reparations and debt justice. And with the UK government in particular, despite their rhetoric of resetting relationships with the global south and with Africa in particular, they are not moving with the clarity and urgency that we need to see our demands of reparative justice realised. So Victoria, with that, if I can conclude, I think in terms of what we need, and this is the kind of provocation to us as African civil society, but also our African leaders, we do need our African leaders when they come to the global north capitals like London to speak with clarity and urgency about reparations, and we need them to be clear that reparations is a clear plank of their foreign policy. We need them to talk to our ministers, global north politicians and government officials and be clear that debt justice, debt cancellation and reparations is a clear demand. And I think the extension of the reparations agenda from the AU is a really important step to helping realise that. We also need civil society in the UK and across the continent to continue to be bold. Reparations is an entitlement, it's not charity, and we need to ensure that that clarity and that boldness informs our campaigning and our advocacy. And we need the continued unity and connecting the dots between the climate agenda, the debt agenda, the tax agenda. And that's why we can be proud at Christian Aid and other big NGOs represented here that we are taking that forward, connecting the dots across the different reparative justice agendas. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I smiled when you gave that hope that the British government finally accepting the reason for reparations and justice. It shows we are heading there. It's a long walk, but a step is a hope that we'll get to there someday. It will be the tortoise walk, but definitely we will reach. And I really want to open up the session to the audience. Because of the exigency of time, I want you to make comments or ask questions when necessary, and my panelists are up to the task to respond to any questions in the room. So I will have somebody with a mic to go around. And it's a feminist discussion, so allow me. I am not going to be biased. I know you because I know we have the he for she's here. We have men that are feminist in thinking and in action. So I am not going to choose all in women, but I want to make it fair. So if we are having 2 women, and as well we'll have 2 men. So I'll take one at the extreme back, and you, and yes, the madam there, and Josephine. Yes, Clara, sorry, Clara. So I'll have a beautiful lady in the green, and a beautiful African lady here in the middle, and a gentleman, the he for she, I suppose, and another at the back. So can you please pass the mic and start? Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay. I will speak in Portuguese, because I'm confident in Portuguese.
Let's make use of our headphones, please. And it's unfortunate the panelists do not have headphones. Can we get some, please? Okay, so in that case, maybe we'll go to a speaking English person and they'll come back to you later once the headphones are available for the panelists.
So I'll be in disadvantage.
Not entirely. You're just being delayed. And I'm sorry about that. Okay. Thank you.
Eu penso que posso falar, né? Penso que posso falar. Okay.
Sure.
Ok. A minha pergunta é diretamente ao colega que vem do Conselho Cristão de Zimbabwe. Estou satisfeito pelo que diz que o Conselho Cristão de Zimbabwe está a trabalhar, está envolvido, o tipo de envolvimento. Estou muito satisfeito, obrigado. Porém, tenho uma pergunta que não quero calar, porque tal como os conselhos cristãos de África se envolveram para a luta de libertação, hoje parece que estão envolvidos também na disseminação, na continuidade, assimetrias entre os próprios e os ricos. Nós temos casos evidentes de lideranças que, quando as independências chegaram, sob os auspícios das teorias do marxismo, leninismo, comunismo, etc., até abandonaram e apregoaram a doutrina de afastamento da igreja a assuntos políticos. Mas hoje voltaram, estão até a empurrar, os líderes estão lá, assumem, entretanto continuam ligados ao poder e continuam a perpetuar estas assimetrias e negócios não próprios. Não será porque as igrejas estão a envolver-se em assuntos que, em princípio, não têm a sua natureza, não deviam estar lá? Porque eu sei que um religioso é um indivíduo que lê a sociedade criticamente, faz sugestões e não se mete na política para benefício. Mas os políticos de hoje são os mesmos religiosos. E penso que no Conselho Cristão Zimbabueano pode estar a acontecer a mesma coisa, e se calhar não avançam muito por causa disto. Não seria melhor encontrar uma solução em afastar a igreja da política para ela trabalhar na sua natureza genuína? Muito obrigado.
Admire, please take note. I think that question was for you. And can we have the next speaker?
Yeah. So myself, Professor Minaketan Behera from India. So I think my question is to the gentleman Admire. So you are excellent that you are doing an excellent job with respect to your explorative study that you are talking about with respect to the crisis of climate crisis, agricultural crisis. So I just want to know two dimension clarification. One is on what is the economic justice that you are doing with respect to gender, and then the second dimension with respect to the term that you are talking about in the contemporary times that we are talking about digitalizations. So this is play a significant role in that context. So what the particularly your church in this Zimbabwe context that doing with respect to digital divide? Then, sir, for you, the second question, you are 100% right that we need to create these local revenue generations. That is very important dimensions. And then the second term that you talk about, that you suggested that we need to, just a minute, to create the that credible data evidence for policy formulations of this. But yes, you are right, that is very essential. But if you go for, we have very, very limited research expenditures. So if you go for education, health, many dimensions are there. So what the alternative that you want to suggest so that we can create a credible evidence that will address the concern that we are talking about? Thank you for this opportunity.
First, I just want to say thank you for an incredible discussion, and thank you for laying a blueprint. It really was homework. My name is Kim Poole. I'm with the Teaching Artists Institute, and this past African Liberation Weekend, our organization led a global delegation that held a symposium at the Vatican, at the Pontifical Urbana Church, the Pontifical Urbana University. I'm thinking in Italian and English at the same time. And at this symposium, we spoke with seminarians that really helped us lead the conversation. When we think about the role of the church in our oppression, for us as an organization, we think to 1452, and we see the Roman Catholic Church as the progenitor of the oppression, and they should be helping to lead the conversation around reparatory justice, even if only low-hanging fruit, like helping us to advocate, as you mentioned that the Church of England is doing. And so my question to you is twofold. The first is, what is your institution's interest in helping us to lead interfaith conversations that approach the Roman Catholic Church as the progenitor? Because we've seen many institutions step up. The evangelicals are doing work, even in small ways, the Church of England, but we're hearing nothing from the Roman Catholic Church, and we really see them as the first, and they should be a part of it, especially this year. The second question is, when I went for the Vatican Symposium, working with the seminarians, I came with my guns blazing. I was ready to say, this is how much you owe us. This is the moral and legal grounds for why you owe us. But then I realized the church is us. The seminarians were from the global south. They were all ordained as priests June 27th of this year. They've gone to Nigeria and Congo and Togo. And so it made me put on a velvet glove. And I realized that we need to really embrace cultural reparations. The pedagogy of how we do this work has to also be a part of that change. Not just the outcome of what we want, but how we get there matters. And so are we decolonizing our approaches? Is that the reparation we owe ourselves? And what say you about this? And my question is specifically to our Christian Aid representative, but I'm open to hear reflections from any panelist that wants to weigh in.
Three more. And so, finally, I see you jubilated. So we'll take a question from you.
Ok, je peux réagir.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to thank the panelists for really unpacking the role of the church first and foremost. We know that this year is the year of Jubilee, as proclaimed by Pope Francis before his demise. And it also coincides with the AU call for reparations and so on. And this is really what we are here about. So how do we take advantage of these great moments that have presented themselves? We know, for instance, that South Africa is hosting the G20 this year, at which the AU is part of the G20. How do we take advantage of that moment? What can we as the church do? I know the interfaith have been meeting and have been part and parcel of the G20. Then I wanted to talk about something that came up yesterday, that we are not able to quantify the damage for which we require reparations. What are we doing in our countries? For instance, in Zimbabwe, you have legacy projects like the Kariba Dam, where we know that when it was being built, a lot of people died and a lot of people were replaced. How do we go back in history and fix that? How do we quantify the reparations that we require for such? What are the organizations, or what are the movements, what are the people, what are the Tonga people that were replaced doing, and what kind of support would they need from the church? Yeah, and I think there's a big problem now with this tsunami Trump. There was a movement, people removing statues of prominent people, I think both in the UK and in the United States, who had profited from slavery and so forth. But now we have a new world order where there's a new honoring of these kind of people. How do we in Africa react? What can we do to make this, yeah.
Okay.
To you, please let me allow my lady to come in.
Ok, donc je vous remercie. Permettez-moi de m'exprimer en français. Et je voudrais saisir cette opportunité et remercier les panélistes pour leur exposé et surtout le partage d'expériences qu'ils ont eu à partager et dans la mise en œuvre des activités et en lien avec cette thématique dans plusieurs pays. Et je voudrais saisir et cette opportunité aussi et faire une petite analyse et exposer le cas de mon pays qu'est le Burkina Faso. Et à cet effet, cette nouvelle architecture financière mondiale est une opportunité pour nous et pour la promotion d'une macroéconomie équitable du point de vue du genre. Je voudrais à cet effet présenter la structure que je représente, qui est l'Alliance technique d'assistance au développement AfCoDD, qui est une organisation de la société civile qui, avec d'autres acteurs au niveau local au Burkina, conduisons un plaidoyer en faveur de la budgétisation sensible au genre depuis un certain temps dans notre pays. Et à cet effet, nous pouvons nous interroger et quelle est l'implication de l'avènement de la nouvelle architecture financière mondiale qui vise à corriger les déséquilibres historiques du système économique international et qui peut avoir à cet effet un impact sur l'amélioration de la budgétisation sensible au niveau local. Et d'abord, ce qu'il y a comme une évidence, c'est que le contexte international influence tout contexte national. Et à cet effet, une réforme de l'architecture financière mondiale vise surtout à rendre le système financier international plus équitable et à cet effet adapté aux réalités contemporaines et dans un esprit de justice réparatrice. Et c'est alors aussi une opportunité pour nous de pouvoir coordonner à cet effet et maximiser les bénéfices que nous pouvions récolter pour les femmes, les enfants et surtout les couches vulnérables. Et pour notre pays, qui est un pays sahélien et qui est confronté à plusieurs défis multidimensionnels que je peux citer, surtout la pauvreté, les problèmes climatiques et surtout sécuritaires, et la recherche de financement pour nous demeure des défis pour nous et surtout pour l'État burkinabé qui doit pouvoir répondre aux urgences humanitaires et soutenir la résilience économique et promouvoir l'égalité du genre et surtout des droits humains. Et à cet effet, des défis, nous pouvons retenir la capacité de négociation limitée et dans les instances au niveau international et aussi le contexte sécuritaire aussi qui sévit dans notre pays. Et enfin, pour le Burkina Faso, et le contexte d'endettement, malgré le fait qu'il soit jugé et modéré par la Banque mondiale, la tendance haussière de cet endettement appelle à une prudence. Et au niveau des recommandations que nous avions eu à formuler également, elles se situent à 3 niveaux. D'abord, pour les acteurs de la société civile que nous sommes, et suivre et évaluer l'impact du financement et octroyé au profit des populations vulnérables et promouvoir une approche inclusive des politiques économiques et enfin participer activement aux dialogues nationaux et internationaux sur la réforme financière et pour les acteurs au niveau partenaires techniques et financiers qui accompagnent les efforts également. C'est d'adapter les mécanismes de financement aux réalités locales et, c'est fini. Et soutenir les initiatives communautaires et programmes sensibles au genre et enfin favoriser une approche de co-construction avec les acteurs nationaux. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so very much for that insight from the Burkina Faso side. And I'll just take one question and then I'll give chance to the panelists to respond to some of the questions.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tinashe Gumbo from All Africa Conference of Churches. I want to thank the presenters. My observation is that it looks like our people are now able to tell in terms of the need for reparative justice, considering what my brother Admire was saying. He listed quite a lot in terms of what people are expecting. But now my challenge that I'm throwing to this meeting is to say, I think there is now an urgent need for prioritization we really need to prioritize our issues, otherwise we lose it. Because if we are not careful, we will target the wrong people at the wrong time. So this is my challenge to this particular session, but also to the broader conference, the need to prioritize and be able to target the right people in our advocacy on reparative justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll want to appeal to my panelists that we have just 2 minutes to make a response and probably our final cut on this whole discussion. Except maybe for Admire, who I know more questions are posed to him. Maybe you can take 5 minutes. But all others, I'm sorry, we just have 2 minutes. Yes, you can.
Thank you. I did not get anything specific directed to me, but just to weigh in on the issue of reparations, the role of the church, and also maybe our call to action as ZimCoDD. I do think that yes, the church has a significant role to play in as far as the reparations question is concerned. But I want to emphasize as well that there is need for great collaboration and partnerships with other different stakeholders, including the academia, think tanks, such that there is depth of documented evidence, which I think is very key in approaching the reparations issue. I want to assume that at some point this discourse may take a legal route. If dialogue is not going to work, I foresee that litigation is going to be an option. And if that route really happens, then we need documented evidence of the wrongs, of the past wrongs, of the loss, of the damage. That is great work that we must begin to do now. And even in our advocacy actions, I think there's a great need to begin to bring to prominence, showcase, preempt some of these loss and damages, quantitative, qualitative, and in whatever format, so that we really make that case for reparations. And I want to be, again, preemptive to submit that for us, debt cancellation is a form of reparation. Yeah, just cancelling out the debt is one form, but we need more than cancellation, more than debt cancellation. We are owed more than we owe. So, but it is one of the forms that we can actually be compensated. It opens up opportunities for us, for future generations. It gives us a level playing field to participate in the international market and so forth. Like I was saying, I'm coming from a country that's been isolated from concessional loans for over 2 decades because of the debt question. So I really feel that it is a starting point that we also need to consider. And then I think ideological clarity in our countries to speak one language with our government. I'm also coming from a country which has recently and proudly so, made moves to compensate former white farm owners. We are compensating, because we have taken the land and now we're paying back. But historically, who takes the land from who? We're actually making a very bad precedence, which I am sure. But all this is happening in the context of trying to be a good global citizen. I appreciate that the government, from where I'm coming from, is acting under pressure to be a good global citizen. But as citizens, I think we must rise up. And they are also saying that you as citizens, you have actually a bigger role to play and push this back. We don't have the money to pay 3.5 billion to pay former farm owners in Zimbabwe. We don't have that money. And we are losing out on other critical services to service that particular debt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Victoria. And thank you for all the comments. The first question was about the role of the church in trying not to mix the church and politics. But in our reflections and in our understanding is that all the issues that we say is politics, these are livelihood issues. When you talk about poverty, when you talk about inequality, when you talk about economic injustice, when you talk about tax and its effect to service delivery, it can be interpreted as politics. So our theology is that the church has a preferential option for the poor and the marginalized. And we are guided by the principles that we will never wait for a time when the church is perfect. We will know that there will always be the church that is associated or that will always applaud even those who are oppressing others. But there is need to be that church which remain the salt and the light of the society. And one of the churches to choose that position, and it has to lead, despite the fact that others may take different positions. So that is our theology and our guiding principles as a council. When it comes to matters that affect people, these are not matters of politics, but these are matters of human dignity. And the church is there to promote human dignity. The question of economic justice and gender, as churches in Zimbabwe, we engage with multi-stakeholders, including women movements. In fact, in 2016, churches in Zimbabwe initiated what we call the Gender and Faith Network. It was led by the work of the church in trying to promote gender justice and women empowerment. And we are still at the forefront. As we speak, as Zimbabwe Council of Churches collaborate significantly with our Ministry of Women Affairs to deal with issues of violence against women, including women in politics, but also we are working with our Zimbabwe Gender Commission towards coming up with a gender equality and a women empowerment bill to address the inequalities that relate to women. Then the issue of engaging with the Roman Catholic, like I said, from the Zimbabwean context, we have had an exploratory conference on issues to do with reparations, supported by Christian Aid and all our partners, AfCoDD, and the Catholics were also part of that conversation. And we came up with one of the recommendations of coming up with an inclusive national commission on reparations, which can start to envision, including what Dr. Gumba has just asked about, the issue of prioritizing. That a national steering committee can work around what issues can we now prioritize, which stakeholders can we engage, including the non-state actors' engagement with the government, because also our government has started a process of trying to quantify these reparations. It has engaged with the universities to have lead researchers and some members of academia who can start to conceptualize these different forms of reparations. So there is also now that need of us as non-state actors to create a platform where we focus on evidencing, research, and prioritizing the issues that we are discussing. Interfaith network, I think it will be important to have an interfaith network, not only at national levels, but at regional and continental level that continues to deliberate on these issues, including leveraging the G20 that South Africa will be hosting, and to promote the conversation, faith-based conversations around reparations, debt and justice within the G20 framework. Thank you.
Maya, please let's keep to 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. I will address two questions quickly. The issue around alternative to get a very good, credible data. I will look at it both at the national and the global level. And from my experience in Sierra Leone, people hide data because they have something to hide. So in Sierra Leone, what we did, first of all, we did a mapping to try to identify the allies within government. And that had helped and works a lot. But apart from that, we also push for a law for access to information. So therefore, it is good for African countries to also push to have access to information law that is workable, that is implemented. At the global level, especially in terms of fighting illicit financial flow, it requires automatic exchange of information. Because the issue around transfer pricing, misinvoicing, they require information to generate the evidence, to challenge those structural issues. So therefore, we have, as an African, we have to build our own automatic exchange of information. Gambia is already building one through the support of World Bank. I will hope that can be replicated to other African countries. I just also want to talk a little bit around the issue of economic justice and gender. We cannot talk about economic justice without pushing the aspect of women economic empowerment. In Sierra Leone, for example, with the support of the Irish Embassy in Freetown, we have pushed for the government budget to be gender responsive. And we now see the government is piloting 5 MDAs. At the local level, we have pushed the same, where we now, gender budgeting have moved from 2.9% to almost 50%. But one way, and that's one way for sustainable economic empowerment. But another one is using the national budget, using procurement as a tool. In the case of Sierra Leone, almost 50% of our national budget goes towards procurement. Which means, if there is a legal way to get women participate in that process, it will help a lot. And we did 3 sets of studies. Number one, we look at what are the legal barriers affecting women to participate in procurement process. Number 2, we look at their capacity. Procurement is about rules. They have their rules and law. We identify all of the flaws in terms of their capacity, in terms of putting their documentation. But number 3, we also look at the practices. Currently, how many women are participating in procurement processes? Of course, the results are clear. In terms of practices, less women are participating in procurement processes, and they are not getting that much contact. So, one of the things we are going to push for a law, I don't know, we can say sunset law, or like a target, like 30% of our public procurement should go towards women that deserve it. In fact, in Sierra Leone, in the 2015 budget, we have that one in our law that says 30% of procurement to go towards women. But by then, we do not understand 30% of what type of procurement. So we did our analysis and now know the type of procurement that women can go to, can apply for and get a winnable one. So that's what we are going to push for. And overall, when women are not economically empowered, we all suffered. It deterred them from participating in politics and doing a whole lot of things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abubakar Kamara, and over to you, Her Majesty.
Yeah, Victoria, I'll just use my 2 minutes maybe to complement the responses given by Admire on the interfaith question and on the G20 and the role of Africa in shaping a new economic world order. Thank you for the question on interfaith approaches and the Catholic Church, and thank you for the work that you've done with the symposium attending the Vatican, because I think it's approaches and engagement like that that will help awaken the Catholic Church to the reparations work that we're doing. Of course, the Catholic Church is a unique, complex and interesting kind of faith institution, but it's a rich institution, and I very much welcome the role of the Catholic Church under the leadership of Pope Francis in leading the kind of Jubilee debt justice work this year in particular, before he passed. And some people may have read, if not, I would encourage you to do so, the Pope Francis Commission on Debt Justice and the report that was published earlier this year. Whilst it doesn't explicitly reference reparations, it's kind of there, the kind of spirit of reparations and the recognition of the colonial history behind the debt crisis and behind structural debt inequalities, definitely in the report. So I think using openings like that provided by the Catholic Church and the late Pope will kind of help us progress the journey of reparations within the Catholic Church. Christian Aid in the UK works with CAFOD, which is the Catholic Development Agency, and whilst it's not as advanced in its journey on advocating and campaigning on reparations, we see our role as kind of working alongside them in an interfaith way, through an interfaith spirit, to kind of bring them on that journey. And then to the question on the role, the G20 and the kind of the role of the church, we absolutely have to see the role of the church, the role of interfaith initiatives in shaping the agenda of the G20. And I see a critical role for the All Africa Council of Churches, for example, and any influence that they have over South Africa as the G20 president. I also think spaces like this that we are in with this conference is also contributing to creating a new world economic order. We shouldn't see what's happening with, Trump and the rise of authoritarianism as something that needs to happen to us. We have agency. We have the ability, even in these discussions, to talk about, and as we have been talking about, what we see a new world economic order that works for us, that is not rigged against us and our continent. We have the agency and the autonomy to start to put those conversations into practice, and also demand of our governments, African governments, to not bend to the will of Trump, to not bend to the will of the authoritarianism, the rise of authoritarianism in the West. And so civil society should be demanding that of African governments. I sometimes laugh to myself that actually, if Trump and the US just ignores Africa, we might be better off. So it's how do you answer a question about Donald Trump? But I think we, as a continent, we need to see this as an opportunity to look inwards as well and develop African solutions to African challenges, and that includes developing a new world economic order that puts us at the centre in our interests as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I want to end on the note that we all have the responsibility to go back to our countries, ensure we engage our leaders, because they need to grow some interest in these discussions we are having. At the end of the day, if we are to come into these spaces, we make all the plans, so we do all the talks, and when we go back, they are not in support. It will be like throwing water on the back of a duck, and we will not want that. So we'll really need to engage some of these government officials to really build interest in ensuring that we push this agenda forward to become a reality. So we are also charged with the responsibility that we need to think Africa. We need to think solidarity. We need to think that we are one. Let us begin to rethink some of the happenings or decisions at a different country level. Why do we need passport? Why do we need e-visa to go to an African country when I'm an African? And I want to draw an example in Mozambique last year. I went there, and it was so frustrating for me to learn that we coming from West Africa are paying more for visa than those coming from the global West. That was surprising for me. And I was asking, why is that so? And along the way, it might not be true, but I heard that there's a long history with West Africa, and that is not good for the North and for Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And so that was the problem. But I would not say it's fact, because it's just an hearsay. But then I just want to continue to urge us all to see it a task for every one of us to push this fight forward. And with resilience, and with courage, and with faith, we are sure of making it a reality. Thank you, everyone, for your time.